I sat in the back row, third from the exit, wearing a blazer that screamed civilian. Around me, dress whites gleamed under the ceremony lights, shoulders squared, medals polished to mirror shine, shoes that could blind you. The air reeked of starch and decades of tradition. This was my little brother Jake's big moment. Lieutenant Jake Winslow, Navy SEAL, the family golden boy, the son who could do no wrong. Jake's one of the sharpest SEALs in his class, someone whispered behind me. A real Winslow, came the reply. I didn't even flinch. I'd been hearing that phrase my entire life. But here's the thing, they didn't see me sitting there. To them, I was just Claire, the daughter who couldn't hack it, the dropout, the one who tried the Navy thing for a hot minute before disappearing into some boring IT job nobody cared about. That was the story my family told. They'd been telling it so long, I think they actually started believing it. Hell, maybe I did too. For a while, I adjusted my blazer cuff, my fingertips brushing where my real uniform sleeves used to end. Colonel Claire Winslow, Naval Cyber Command. But not today. Today, I was just a shadow at the edge of my brother's spotlight. Up front, my parents sat like royalty. Admiral Richard Winslow, retired but still standing ramrod straight in his civilian suit. My mother, Diane, pearls at her throat, her hand resting on Jake's arm like he was made of gold. She looked proud, the kind of proud that could shatter a daughter's heart if she let it. I had zero plans to be seen today. I was going to be polite and visible and gone by the reception. But then General Mark Lyman stepped to the podium, broad shoulders, composed, the kind of man who never stumbled over his words. His gaze swept the crowd once, then stopped dead on me, and stayed there. He paused just long enough to shift something in the air. I didn't move, not yet, but I felt it coming like a storm on the horizon. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. The Winslow way was born into the kind of family where rank came before first names. In Norfolk, Virginia, that wasn't unusual. Every other house had a flag on the porch and a story about someone who served. But in the Winslow house, military service wasn't a calling. It was a bloodline. My grandfather commanded destroyers in the Pacific. My father, Admiral Richard Winslow, led operations in the Gulf and briefed presidents. I learned to say yes, sir, before I learned to ride a bike. We didn't take family vacations, we transferred duty stations. Our living room was a museum of awards and folded flags, and nobody ever touched the wall where his bronze star hung. The rules were simple, unspoken, but ironclad. Men served. Women supported. Winslow men fought, bled, and commanded. The women stood straight at ceremonies and made perfect potato salad. That was the shape of pride in our house. It wasn't cruel, it was tradition. It was what worked, and I completely ruined the symmetry. I wasn't loud about it. I just didn't fit where I was supposed to go. While other girls were watching MTV or practicing pageant walks, I was in the garage taking apart old radios just to figure out how signals moved through the air. When I was 9, I beat Jake in this logic game our father brought back from Japan. Dad threw the board away that night, said it was missing pieces. When I was 12, I started sneaking into Dad's home office after lights out. He thought I was sleeping. I was reading old Navy encryption manuals like bedtime stories. I loved the way they made me feel like I was inside something nobody else could touch. Then one evening, he caught me. I was sitting at his desk, decoding a cipher from an old Pacific Fleet drill. The solution came to me fast. I scribbled it out on a yellow legal pad and leaned back, proud as hell. He stepped into the doorway. I looked up, smiling. I think I cracked it. He walked over, glanced at the paper, read the sequence. Then he did something I'll never forget. He laughed. Not cruel, not kind either. Just that dismissive chuckle that makes your face burn and your spine go cold. He ruffled my hair. Stick to cheerleading, Claire. This stuff's for the men who run the show. Then he left. And I sat there staring at that legal pad like it had betrayed me. I didn't cry. I didn't argue. But something inside me went quiet that night. Not broken, just sealed away. From then on, I knew if I wanted to be seen, I'd have to earn it somewhere outside our house, and maybe never bring it back home. The secret plan B17, I'd stopped sharing anything that mattered. I still came to dinner, still asked about Jake's training or Mom's book club. I smiled in photos. I played the daughter role perfectly, but the part of me that counted, the part building something in silence, stayed locked away. That year, I applied to the United States Naval Academy without telling anyone. I trained at dawn, ran 6 miles every morning, memorized specifications for nuclear subs, cracked encryption challenges over lunch. I didn't date, didn't go to prom. I wasn't rebelling, I was preparing, and nobody noticed. When the acceptance letter came, it arrived in a plain envelope. No golden seal, no fanfare, just words that changed everything. We are pleased to offer you admission. I stared at it for an hour. Not because I doubted I deserved it, but because I wasn't sure what to do with the joy. Where do you put it when there's nobody to share it with? That night, I brought the letter to dinner. My hands were shaking. I tucked my hair behind my ears. 3 times before I spoke, Annapolis, I said, laying the envelope down like evidence. I got in. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then my father leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. He didn't smile, didn't even reach for the letter. You'll crumble under pressure, Claire. Basic training's going to send you crying home. He pulled out his wallet and set a crisp $100 bill on the table. Then he turned to Jake with a grin. Bet she drops out by week 4, Jake chuckled. Not mean, just comfortable. Like it was obvious, Mom reached for my hand. Her voice was, honey, soft. Honey, you're so bright. You don't need to prove anything. You could teach, maybe. Be safe, safe. I looked at the money on the table, at Jake's easy grin, at my mother's gentle retreat from anything that might be dangerous. The air felt thick enough to choke on. I'm going, I said. My voice didn't shake, but something inside me shifted away from them forever. They didn't drive me to Annapolis. Said, it was too far, too much traffic. I took a Greyhound 6 hours with a duffel bag and no goodbye hug. I watched them from the bus window. Dad standing with his arms crossed, Mom dabbing her eyes, Jake checking his phone. For a moment, I wondered if I was making a mistake. Then the bus turned and their house slipped out of view. And that thought never came back. How weak and Bayondanopolis didn't ease you in. From the moment I stepped off that bus, it was noise and order and motion. Names barked, boots hitting pavement, someone yelling before I could even breathe, and I loved it. Not because it was easy, it wasn't, but because for the first time in my life, I was somewhere nobody knew I was supposed to fail. Still, it didn't take long for the whispers to start. She's a girl, and she's not even that tall. Winslow? As in Admiral Winslow. She must be here on legacy. They didn't know my father would rather eat his medals than vouch for me. During live fire week, I checked out my rifle and noticed something was off. The sights were misaligned subtly, but enough. One wrong shot and someone could have been seriously hurt. Or me. I flagged it. Got told, maybe you bumped it. I hadn't. Someone wanted me shaken. It worked. That night in my bunk, I stared at the ceiling and wondered if I was already starting to crack. 3 weeks later, during a cyber simulation drill, I was mid-hack, tracking a threat scenario, when a power surge blew through my station. It knocked me backward hard. The flash fried the interface, and electricity shot up my arm like lightning in my bones. The diagnosis, nerve damage. The recommendation, surgery, months of rehab, possible discharge. I didn't cry in public, but in the infirmary. When the curtains closed and the lights dimmed, I lay there watching shadows move across the wall. For the first time, I let myself wonder if maybe my father had been right. I wrote home just once, not asking for help, just trying to anchor myself to something familiar. I got a response 2 weeks later. Mom's letter was kind. If you didn't read too closely, she talked about the garden, the neighbor's new dog, a distant cousin's engagement. She ended with, "You've always been so bright, Claire. Maybe this is a sign to try something more stable, No letter from my father. Nothing from Jake, and then Lieutenant Sarah Denver walked in. She didn't knock, didn't ask how I felt. She dropped a manila folder on my tray and said, 3 ciphers. Solve them by Monday. I blinked at her. She pointed to the splint on my wrist. You've still got a brain, don't you? That was how it began. Every week, she brought more. Harder puzzles, faster timers, impossible simulations. When I faltered, she snapped. The Navy doesn't need polished, it needs pressure forged. I didn't know it then, but she was handing me the only thing I'd needed since the day I left home. A reason to believe I could belong, even if nobody was watching. I stayed. Finished rehab with a brace on my wrist and steel in my spine. The pain never fully left, but I learned how to move with it, how to carry weight differently, how to type again slower at first, then faster than before. I trained when nobody watched, studied while others slept. By graduation, I was in the top 5% of my class. I stood at attention in my dress whites, metal still warm from the last polishing, my posture perfect, my salute sharp. My family came, just as they said they would. Mom wore navy and pearls. Dad in his full suit, nodding with formal politeness. Jake was taller now, 19, still smug around the eyes. They clapped when my name was called. Quietly, no cheering, just polite acknowledgement like I'd passed a test they hadn't studied for. At the reception, my father shook my hand like I was someone else's daughter. You made it through, he said, his tone flat. But the real Navy's a different beast. That's where we'll see what you're really made of. I smiled, not out of warmth, just instinct. Then I turned away before I said something I couldn't take back. I didn't mention my orders to Naval Cyber Command, didn't bring up the commendation waiting on my desk. They hadn't asked, so I didn't offer the real workover the next year. I ran point on an operation tracing a cyber attack targeting U.S. ports. Thousands of lives were on the line. Billions in infrastructure. We stopped it barely. My name was on the after-action report, top line. That night, I called home. Mom answered, distracted. That's nice, dear. But when are you thinking of settling down? My father got on the line next. He didn't ask what the operation was. Didn't ask what my team had accomplished. Lieutenant commands are stepping stones, he said. Most don't last there. Don't get cocky. I hung up, staring at the commendation still in my lap. It was the first time I understood they didn't just misunderstand me, they had chosen not to see me at all. The Christmas revelation that Christmas, the house smelled the same. Clove, roast beef, the faint bite of pine needles. But the silence underneath had changed. Jake had just finished SEAL training. His uniform was new, the insignia still stiff on his chest. He wore it like it belonged to him before he'd even earned it. And to my parents, it did. The living room was already decorated in his honor. Photos on the mantle, flag pins in every guest's lapel. His future was the only story being told. Jake's the real thing now, Dad said to one of the neighbors. He's where the Winslow legacy lives on. I sat on the couch, gift in my lap, waiting for the right moment to speak. I had just returned from a black ops simulation that intercepted an international sabotage attempt. My team had received classified recognition. I'd been promoted again faster than expected. It wasn't something I could share fully, but I thought maybe some part of it could be enough. So I began, gently. We just wrapped a major protocol operation. It prevented a lot of damage. A lot of people are safe tonight. Dad looked up from carving the roast. Not cruel, just unimpressed. Claire's doing her computer thing, he said. Jake's out there leading men into the real stuff. The room chuckled. Even Jake gave a crooked grin. Hope you're weef. I held up, sis. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. He looked away. Later, in the kitchen, I helped Mom with dishes. She handed me a towel and touched my shoulder like she still believed that was love. You always were the smart one, she said softly. Just not built for the other path. That was when it happened. I didn't snap, didn't yell. I just stopped. Stopped trying to be seen. Stopped volunteering updates. stopped giving them pieces they never wanted to hold. That night, after the gifts were opened and the guests had gone, I gathered my things and left without making a sound. Nobody asked why, and I never offered. The invitation arrived in a thick white envelope. Gold lettering spelled out what I already knew. Jake Winslow, newly minted SEAL lieutenant, would be honored at Coronado Naval Base in 3 weeks. I let it sit on my kitchen counter for 5 days. Some mornings, I almost threw it away. Other nights, I caught myself rereading it, as if hidden between the lines was a reason not to go. My husband Adam watched me quietly. He didn't press. When I finally spoke, my voice surprised even me. "I'm going," he nodded, jaw set. "You don't owe them anything." "I know," I said. "But Jake's still my brother." We both knew I wouldn't wear the uniform. This was his day, not mine. I chose a simple navy blazer, white blouse, flats polished but unassuming, hair in a low bun, no medals, no insignia. The bars and stars I'd earned stayed locked in a case back home. I drove alone, rehearsed my neutral smile, braced for Dad's comments, Mom's concerned glances, Jake's easy jokes. At the base, I merged with the crowd, slipping into the line of guests. It was a warm day, the sun reflecting off every shoulder board in sight. They spotted me in the parking lot. "Claire, you made it," Mom chirped, hurrying over. She wore coral, always the opposite of whatever I picked. Dad stood beside her, hands behind his back. "Glad you could show," he said, the way people do when they don't expect much. Jake grinned and gave a half shrug. "Didn't think you'd want to relive old Navy memories." "I'm just here to celebrate," I said, the moment of truth. Inside the auditorium, flags lined the stage. A string quartet played softly. Seats filled with officers, families, commanders. I sat near the aisle alone. Ceremony protocol began. Colors presented, anthem sung, names called. Then General Mark Lyman took the stage. He was tall, composed. His voice had that calm, practiced clarity that commands attention. He praised Jake, outlined his performance, his leadership potential, his bright future. Then his eyes swept across the room and landed on me. They didn't move. His voice hesitated only a breath, but I felt the shift. Something small in the air changed. He adjusted his notes, continued. I lowered my gaze, willed myself invisible. But I knew what was coming. The final words of commendation passed. Applause rose, then fell, and then came the moment that changed everything. General Lyman stepped down from the podium, walked straight into the crowd, straight toward me. He stopped, saluted. "Colonel Winslow." It was loud enough for the rows around us to hear. Conversations cut short. Heads turned like a wave. "Your cyber framework saved my team during the Quran breach." I never got to say thank you. The room froze. Mom gasped, her hand flying to her chest. She staggered into a chair. Dad stood motionless, jaw slack. Jake didn't speak, just stared like someone had rewritten everything he thought he knew. More voices joined in. "Wait, Colonel Winslow." The blackout op. A younger officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, your protocols are now required reading in Joint Command." I stood up slowly. My blazer suddenly felt too thin. "Thank you, General," I said evenly. "But today is not mine. It's my brother's." He paused, then nodded with respect. "Understood. But we know who you are." And just like that, the story they'd been telling about me cracked wide open. The reckoning thief found me just off the main corridor, near a small conference room with the door half open. Mom was pale, one hand gripping the back of a chair. Jake stood beside her, still in uniform, arms crossed like he hadn't decided whether this was real or not. My father was pacing slow and stiff, like someone walking through a memory he didn't trust. When I stepped in, he stopped. "Colonel," he said, not loud, but sharp. "What kind of game is this?" I closed the door behind me. "It's not a game." He took a step forward. "You let us believe." "No," I said. "You believed what was easiest." "I didn't correct you." Mom spoke next, her voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us?" "We didn't know, Claire." "How could we not know?" I looked at her, not with anger, just quiet clarity. Because you didn't want to. That's not fair, she whispered, isn't it? I asked. Every time I tried to share something school, missions, promotions, you shut it down. Changed the subject. Made it about Jake. Jake shifted, his jaw tightening. I didn't know, he said, softly. I mean, I knew something was off. You talked different, carried yourself different. But I didn't ask. I guess I didn't want to be the second Winslow. That landed deeper than anything else in the room. I let the silence stretch. Not to punish them, just to let the truth settle. I didn't stay quiet to hurt you, I said finally. I stayed quiet to protect myself. Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose, suddenly older than I remembered. You're telling me that all these years, while we thought you were floundering, you were running operations like that? Yes, and we mocked you? Yes. He didn't respond, just stood there, the weight of it folding his shoulders in. Then the door creaked open. Adam stepped in, quiet as always. You okay? He asked me. Yeah, I said. They just found out I'm not a failure. He looked around the room, then back at me. Took them long enough. The dinner a week later, the phone rang just after sunset. It was my father. Not a message relayed through Mom, not an email. His voice. We'd like to have you over, he said, formal like he was issuing a dinner invitation to a visiting officer. Just us. No neighbors, no speeches. I paused before answering. All right, that Saturday, Adam and I pulled into the driveway I hadn't seen in over a year. The porch light was on, the steps swept clean. The door opened before we knocked. Mom greeted us with a hug that didn't hold too tight. Thank you for coming, she said, her voice quiet but steady. Inside, the table was already set. Not for show, just simple dishes, cloth napkins, glasses of water already poured. Dad stood when we entered the dining room. I hadn't seen him rise for anyone in years. Claire, he said, would you sit? Dinner was careful, everyone choosing words like stepping stones. Halfway through, he set down his fork and looked straight at me. I've been thinking, he said, and I owe you apologies. Not one, several. He didn't list them, didn't explain. I nodded. That was enough. Mom reached across the table and touched my hand. We thought we were protecting you, but maybe we were just shielding ourselves. I didn't answer right away. Then I said, I stopped sharing because every time I tried, you turned it into something smaller. I needed to protect what I'd built. Jake, quieter than usual, added, we made it hard for you to be honest. That's on us. Nobody cried. But something softened just enough to let the room breathe. The moment I'd been waiting for 6 months later, I stood on a stage in Washington, D.C. The Navy Cross pinned just above my heart. It was one of the rare moments my work was allowed to surface, not behind closed doors or buried under clearance levels. Just a name, a face, a medal that said, we see you. In the front row, my family sat together. Mom dabbed her eyes with a cloth handkerchief I hadn't seen since childhood. Jake stood in his seal blues, heels locked, spine straight. When I stepped off the platform, he saluted first. My father shook my hand, then pulled me into a brief, unscripted hug. You've redefined what Winslow means, he said. I met his eyes. I didn't do it for the name, Dad. I know, he said finally. That's what makes you who you are. Later, someone from the press approached. Colonel Winslow, what does this honor mean to you? I looked past the lights, past the applause, past all the years they didn't see me. It means I was never lost, I said. Just never seen.